This podcast provides a platform for our guests to express their own personal views and opinions. Some or all of these views and opinions may not be shared by Ben and/or Yoel.
Welcome to the Too Dad to Quit podcast,
the podcast where we highlight stories of dads on the other side of divorce
to inspire and give strength to dads going through it.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Yoel.
This week we have Eric Mabie. Eric is a very health-conscious person. He has been focused on health and fitness since he was a young kid and has never stopped. He turned it into a business. He had a horrible accident in his 20s and rehabilitated himself with mind and body and soul. And his story is very, very intriguing. And he's got insights and for days.
Yeah. I mean, Eric, there were so many quotable quotes, he kept them going rapid fire almost. I take notes here, as you know, and I just couldn't keep up with all the pearls of wisdom that he had to share. He clearly is somebody who, as I said in the podcast, he walks the walk, not just talks the talk. He has consumed personal development. He lives it and breathes it, and it's definitely going to come through in the podcast. So I'm super excited for our audience to have a look and to have a listen as well.
Yeah, so grab your pens and enjoy. This week we are sitting down with Eric Mabie. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Eric lives in Palm Harbor, Florida, and has been separated for over 3 years. He is the father to two boys, ages 18 and 13. Professionally, he is a holistic health coach and a real estate investor. Personally, he loves golfing and anything in nature. So welcome, Eric. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
There's a bunch I want to get into about that, but I also saw you weren't a native Floridian. That came at what point in your life?
Yeah, we upstate New York, born and raised until I was 12, and then moved to Florida with my parents got divorced, so I'm a product of that as well. And moved to Florida when I was 12 years old. So 33 years ago now.
Wow. And both your parents moved to Florida? One of them?
Yeah. So my dad moved me down, and then my mom came right after with my sister, my youngest sister. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. So you went to school, college, were you
went to
always
middle school here? What's that?
No, were you always into fitness, or that come later as well?
No, it kind of like I just fell in love with it at 12 years of age, started building my own workout equipment, and then started writing my own programs. And then by the time I was 18, I had enough people just constantly asking me questions because I was just always interested in it. So I started the wellness company at 18.
Wow.
Yeah,
18.
It's just been kind of a passion. And then, of course, obviously through decades and decades, it just evolves into more comprehensive things. We do, way more than just fitness now at this point.
Wow.
That's
I
awesome.
didn't realize that. I thought it was a recent thing based on the post that I found you on.
So that is because I started my company so long ago. I never used number one, I started my company before the internet anyways. And so I had enough success without any internet that all of the social media that you got, I literally just brought, after 27 years in business, I just brought on my first social media marketing director, first one in 2 months.
Congratulations.
So
yeah.
Everything you're seeing is all new. I stammered through a handful of posts and videos prior, but nothing like you're getting now, because I actually have, brought someone that actually knows what they're doing, and they're, that's not what I do. Right. So I'm not trained in that. I have no passion in that. It's not. And so finally taking the leap to hire someone and outsource it, not even outsource it, insource it, but having a person on staff.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
What got you into fitness to begin with, especially at such a young age?
Yeah, it was just around, my parents, I don't think they did anymore. Like, they went for runs and we had a pull-up bar. And then my uncle was huge into weightlifting. He was a trainer in California. He lived with us for a period of time. So I don't know, it was always around my eyeballs, and I just really took it on. Just I was lifting weights by myself with rusty dumbbells in the basement. just, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I just did it, and it just stuck, and I love it.
Wow.
And you worked
Yeah.
out by yourself? It's so interesting because my parents are also divorced, and like I just found people. Like I was always finding friends or finding activities or playing sports, like anywhere to
Yeah.
like have some sort of like stability in like a quasi
Yep.
family.
Yeah. So I did have all that, but like the weightlifting, I was the first like little kid working out that I knew.
Mhm.
So, I would just train in my basement alone. And, when I was in New York, there's no basements in Florida. So when we moved to Florida, I went to the garage or out on the
Right.
pool deck. So yeah, just, no one was lifting weights at that age, especially back in 1990. Now I train a lot of kids, but we do it in a very different way than standard weightlifting is done.
Wow.
Wow.
And
What? Yeah, go ahead.
were you into wrestling at all? Or it was just lifting?
They're separate. The answer is yes, because that was where I excelled in sports. But weightlifting came first, and then all the other sports that I played were
Wow.
just there. But the weightlifting and exercise was primary. I mean, I remember at 7 years old, like really wanting to have an 8-pack and really wanting to like be
Wow.
the fastest kid in the school, and like just yeah. But wrestling, yeah, that's a whole nother story.
By the way, you mentioned kids, and you started at a young age. I was always told when I was younger, weightlifting stunts growth. You can't lift.
Yeah.
So I was doing tons of push-ups and anything but weightlifting. But I don't know. I mean, do you have any research on that? I'm sure
100%. Yeah. So again, old limiting beliefs, and a lot of it, again, if like when I'm training kids under resistance, now, yeah, you don't want to damage growth plates. So, you shouldn't have an 8-year-old. And just for clarification, my kids are 8 and 13. So I got a little guy.
Nice.
And yeah, you don't want to be like doing Olympic deadlifting with a 9-year-old. So it's nothing like that. It's functional sports training. It's you provide resistance in a safe, healthy manner. And then the biggest thing that I work with kids on is actually enhancing their central nervous system for balance, coordination. That's really how you help a human body excel, and then eliminate injuries as well through those stabilizer exercises and very complex biomechanical movement patterns. So we do, I've got a couple pictures or videos of my 12-year-old lifting weights at a very progressive level, nothing extreme, always higher repetition so that the weight and resistance on his joints is very, very low. To keep it safe. But yeah, the stunting the growth thing, it's just funny. Yeah. If they're in the German training tanks of Olympic weightlifters, sure, I wouldn't do that to a 9-year-old. But for the way that you can do it, you're just fine training as kids.
It's funny to you, but my dad is 6'1" and my mother's 4'9". So I didn't do anything that may have stunted my growth. So I didn't lift weights. I didn't drink coffee. I didn't do drugs. I did nothing that could have stunted my growth.
Yeah. I got a mom in the forest too, man.
Yeah. So I stayed far away of all of it.
Wow. So Eric, you maintained from the age of 12, you've maintained your fitness the entire time, or did you have periods? Wow. That's incredible consistency.
Yeah. I've had injuries, but I've always, because again, part of my story is I was in a severe car accident that debilitated my spine all the way to where I couldn't walk at one point in my early 20s.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So I had to learn. That's where it went from a training facility to a holistic wellness coaching, because all of my fitness training, weightlifting background did nothing but continue to re-injure me. When you don't have a young, perfect body, which what adult does and what people do, is that when you start applying stress to dysfunctional body joints or structures, you magnify injury. And so I kept hurting myself through what I knew about weightlifting, and I had no clue about how the body actually works. And that includes inflammation from food, inflammation from stress, caffeine, lack of whatever the things are. I had to figure out how to walk again. And then from walking again, how do I get strong again? So although I've had variations in my fitness journey because of injury, it's always been an interest. I've never not studied it. I'm always reading a book at some point, nonstop, year round, always, forever.
Wow, interesting. Would you say that, I'm curious, because I've watched interviews, like, for example, I saw an interview of Bob Iger, and he's the CEO of Disney.
Okay.
I think he's back.
He's back.
He resigned.
He's back.
And he's known for being into a major fitness routine. And he was asked about that and what motivates him, and he actually quite honestly said, "Well, health is a big part, but also vanity." And I thought that was interesting because
Yeah.
there's no question. I know for myself, I was, I got into shape after my divorce or in the process of the divorce. And definitely I would say vanity plays a big part in that. So, what's your take on that? Would you agree with that? And if so, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's like any other journey that someone's on. There's all the why, right? Why do we do anything? And you have your superficial why, which is, and I love that he was just transparent. He's like, yeah, I want to look good.
Yeah, I
right?
loved it. Yeah, yeah.
And so that, who am I, or who is anyone to fault anyone for their whys? As a health coach and like 40% of what I do day to day is life coaching. So in that realm, when I look at those answers, then you can go deeper and start peeling away, because I used to have, like, because of my parents' divorce, and then they went bankrupt, and then I had all this money scarcity, lack, fear. I had my own self-worth tied to money and finances growing up and as a young adult. And so that was my why, but it's an unhealthy why, because I'm attaching identity to money. Or if you're attaching identity to fitness, so what happens when, so imagine Marilyn Monroe one day got to be 90 years old. She's no longer the sexiest woman on the planet. So now what? Now she's going to be stressed out, upset, longing for the past, blah, blah, blah. And now she's going to be unhappy because of something that she attached identity to, which is, anytime we attach identity to anything, we're going to create suffering at some point in our life. So I had the same thing over finances. I had to relinquish my identity from finances so that I could actually be free in the world of finance. Wow. And not be run by that attachment to it. So that's just sort of my global scope on it. But, everyone's on their own journey and their path. And if that's the motivator to get you going, great. We all need something to get that started. And then how it evolves is up to the person.
No, that's great. And we've talked on this podcast about identity. So you're talking about attaching identity. I'm not an expert by any stretch, but I like a lot of the books about yoga, and I've read a lot about that. And they're big into non-identity, right? So
yeah,
would you agree with that sort of idea of trying to sort of not identify with anything, one thing in particular, to say, like, yes, I'm a dad, but I don't identify as exclusively a dad, or I don't identify as this or that.
Yeah, correct. 100%. Because it breeds, the moment you identify, there's an attachment. And then the moment there's an attachment, now there's a dysfunction, because we are not, yes, I have a title of a dad, but there are parents who are like, that's who they are. Or like, let's say I'm Michael Jordan. Well, eventually you're no longer the Michael Jordan, because you just age out of that identity or that attachment to that. I am the greatest basketball player, eventually you're not the greatest basketball player, because his knees are bad. He's in his 50s, you can't keep that up. And so it's a way of getting ahead of the inevitable suffering that comes from attachment.
Yes.
It's so interesting, because I know Yoel talks about this all the time, identity, and he doesn't want to attach himself to some identity. But for me, the only identity I am is I'm Ben Stern. And that's it. That's all I've ever been. And whatever I am within the Ben Stern, that's what I am. And, the most important thing to me is that I have a good name and that I'm nice to people. And when people hear my name, they're like, oh, Ben Stern, he's the best. That's all. That's it for me. I don't have the vanity thing. I don't have, Yoel came to my house one weekend and he's like, where are your mirrors? I was like, I don't know. Like, I never look in the mirror. Like, that's not a thing. And he's like, where are they? I don't see any mirrors in this house. I'm like, I think my kids have one in the closet. I don't know.
Yeah, but
Always.
I'm gonna challenge you on that, Ben, and then I'm curious. So not to ask Eric to weigh in between us here as well. You're a coach, right? But and
Yeah,
not
I
to
am
make
a
you the
coach
judge.
and I'm neutral.
No, but I mean, I think the reality is that, especially a lot of us men that have, you're separated, Eric, but Ben and I have gone through the divorce process. I think a big part of it is because we identify so strongly as husbands. Like that is so much a part of our lives. And when that sort of is taken away because of that strong identity, it's very shocking to many people. And Ben, I would challenge you, Ben. I'm not so sure that you didn't identify as, a husband. And when that was taken away, or, I don't want to say it in that way, but when that was no longer the case, that's a big awakening. And same for dad. I think that is a big part of your identity. I don't think you would have started this podcast. I'm not saying, so that's my point. Like when I talk about the yogis talking about trying to move away from identity, we're human beings. Like getting to that state is extremely difficult. Only the masters fully can say, that they don't have an identity, but everybody else maybe is trying to get to that point if you're into that sort of thing. But we all have identities and identify whether we're conscious of it or not,
No, I'm saying I'm a multitude of identities. I am many, many things. I am not just one thing. And all of these things, and they're going to continue to change, make up Ben Stern. So I'm not tied to one thing. I am a multitude of things. That's it. So I don't, it doesn't go deeper from that for me. But anyway, Eric, back to you.
Yes.
Ben loves these
So
discussions.
I'm always curious, like who qualifies as a coach? What makes someone, like coaching is like a big deal now, and everybody's like, I'm a
Oh,
coach.
it is.
That. And hearing your story, I'd like to get into it if you don't mind, but it definitely sounds like you're a person who was struck by a big incident in your life and you had to battle back. So you have that knowledge and that experience to coach someone through it, which is kind of what we're trying to do here, because we've been through divorce and we want to, being on the other side, we're able to help people that are going through it. But I'd like to like rewind. You 18, you opened up this gym, everything was going great. And then this incident happened, which you get into. What were you up to in life at that point?
So there's a couple key like moments that occurred in my life. And so the car accident was the big one on the physical level. But then, again, we all come up through crap, right? Whether it's divorced parent, and even people like, again, we are all evolving consciousnesses. We're all evolving people. So even people that come from this perfect little, cookie cutter home and, my parents loved each other and we went on vacations and everything was good. There's still a human, there's still a soul evolving through their human experience. And so, going through my parents' divorces, going through moving from my, born and raised town to an area where I knew nobody in middle school, which is when, like, again, I now have a middle school kid and it's just, it's weird. You got elementary school and you have high school, but then like the middle school years are just so wildly different. So I moved, so all of the things that I collected as baggage as a kid, I brought into my adult life. And all of a sudden, I started running up against the fallout of not having healed that. And I had a mentor recommend I start down this path of personal development. Wow. So I began taking courses, reading books, meditating, even though I'd been a little bit into meditation earlier, really diving into it. And I started to like heal all of these relationships, mostly my parents, healing those relationships, healing, just like I started to peel away all of the unconscious baggage, trauma, whatever that I never dealt with. And I got to do that in my mid to late 20s. And so I started to feel like this freedom. And I was like, holy shit. And so then once you start down that path and you start self-analyzing, then you can hear in everyone else's speaking shit that they're dealing with that they haven't addressed because it's in their book.
Wow.
So, because again, the experience is that I've been there. So I've told all the lies to myself. I know what I know what the surface words are.
Yeah.
And I know what the buried unconscious pain that I was running from or hiding from or ignoring. And so with my clients, I started to hear, because in a coaching environment, people just tell you everything.
Yeah.
And so I started to hear all of the background that they weren't telling me. And I started to give them suggestions, recommendations, and they're like, oh my God, that totally worked. And then I recommend this book or take this course or do this breath type, and all of a sudden, like, again, it works and so then the life coaching practice took on a whole life of its own, because now, I can do that from anywhere on the planet. I don't have to like structurally assess somebody. I can literally just listen to them, hear what's going on in the back, and then help them propel to their next level. So that was like those emotional things coming to a head. And then I want to thrive. And so even at that age, I didn't want to suffer. And I wanted to take action so that I could live better, be better, feel better. And then the last major one, which was great because the universe will test you once you think like you really got something down. The universe is gonna be like, really think you got this down?
Next wave. Yeah.
Yeah. Next wave. So as a real estate investor, not knowing actually how money worked and how investing worked, in my late 20s, early 30s, I was in the collapse of 2008.
Right.
So here we are, we're starting a family. I've got young kids. I'm the breadwinner, and and I'm broke. So then that's where I really got to heal from my attachment and identification with money, was having it all gone, filing bankruptcy, and being completely at peace with nothing.
Wow.
And that's where that kind of the third major event in my life happened, was actually going to I love this story. It's nice coaching moment. I went to the bankruptcy court in Tampa, handed them my bankruptcy paperwork, and the lady is like, why are you smiling? And she's like, nobody walks up this, and hands like smiling. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, if I turn this smile upside down, do I get all my money back? Do you like give me a check? Like the bank got bailed out? Like, is that how this works?
That's
because
great.
if it doesn't, if I don't get all my money back by being upset, then there's really it doesn't serve me any purpose. So, that's like the culmination of the story, but the years, the bleed out took a while. It took a while for me to bleed out to nothing. And what I had to learn and go through and overcome every single day, like I listened to audiobooks and different programs on non-attachment, and I'm talking like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day, like every single day for almost 10 to 12 years. I immersed myself in non-attachment, letting go, surrender, and at the same time, commitment, manifestation, realigning my core beliefs with something of a higher quality, not an attachment to like, I got to make money to feed my family. Like I had to get out of the scarcity, lack, survival, and into thriving emotional state before I could do it as an actual state.
Wow. Are there some, I've got a bunch of questions. I'm sure Ben does also. Are there some books that stand out as your favorites out there for people that you would
Absolutely.
recommend?
All right. I'm going to give him a plug. Is my man. I'm sure pretty well known. Eckhart Tolle.
Oh, Eckhart Tolle. Sure. I have The Power of Now. I don't have that one.
So that was Power of Now and A New Earth back in the day that I got them, where they were on CDs.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to each book over 200 times.
Wow.
Each.
Wow.
Like that. yeah, like that's how committed I am to like just work, do the work. You got to do the work. So his two books were the absolute pivotal um, impact in my life and in my transformation. Then from there, there's a myriad of other books that are all fantastic. There's a couple of near-death experience pretty cool because to really understand life, it's really great if you can have a little glimpse at death. So I like going down that rabbit hole. I also love the neuroscience quantum physics thing. Joe Dispenza is the biggest name, one of the bigger names now. His stuff is great because he relays what could be complex in very, very simple, practical terms and language so that everyone can understand it. So he came way, way, way later in my journey. But Eckhart, for me, is like the fundamental root of it, of getting clear. And then once you get rid of all your crap, then you can move on to different success books. Because trying to build success on a crappy foundation is just going to perpetuate the same problems.
That's a great quote. Have you gotten into Michael Singer at all? Untethered Soul, Living Untethered.
Great, yeah, love that book. Yeah,
big fan of his.
Yeah, every book I read at least 6 times, because there's no way. Like, look at Michael's, his wisdom, his comprehensive knowledge, the way that he articulates that. There's no way that I could read that book 1, 2, or even 3 times and truly absorb the wisdom that he poured into that book. So it's just one of my general rules with stuff like his work is like, it's got to be 6 times minimum for me to really be able to like experience what he's saying. I use his examples a lot as well. Yeah, he's great.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm a big Michael Singer fan, and also Eckhart Tolle. So I was really relating to what you were saying before about, when you immerse yourself, you start to realize things. And it's obviously, I mean, for you, it serves you well in what you do as a coach, but for the average person, obviously the goal is to stay in our own lane. God knows I've got plenty to work on myself, but I do realize that I will notice things in other people that I feel that others don't see themselves. Like they just will not go to that place, or they cannot. But I know that I don't want to say never. I dabbled with the idea of coaching, but I haven't gotten into it. I'm not saying it's impossible in the future, but I do feel like it takes special qualities to be a coach. In other words, just knowing and but immersing and knowing. What do you think, not to put you on the spot or to toot your own horn, but do you feel there's certain qualities that you have that enables you to be such an effective coach? Like, is there some sort of secret or not so secret sauce that allows you to do what you're doing? Because I can tell just, I've only known you for about a half hour, but you're really really impressive and really knowledgeable.
Thank you.
You have a great aura to you. So what do you think it is?
Have
you ever thought about that?
A little bit. There's an absolute alignment with what I do, because like, for example, again, this is my 27th year in business. I will be working in this facility about 12 to 13 hours a day, 3 days a week. And then my half days are 7 to 9 hours. And if you're not in absolute alignment with what your purpose on this planet is, you can't put in those hours and not burn out or not be stressed. Like this is, and so there's, again, it's that whole nurture versus nature. I don't know how much of it is just who I am, and also how much of it is who I've become because of the immersion, the amount. Again, you've gotten a little glimpse of it. Like Eckhart Tolle's books, I'm not kidding you, 200 times each book minimum.
Amazing.
Like anything I do or everything I do, I look to, in the areas that matter to me, I look for full immersion, so that I can really have the results that I am intending to have from taking on the practice. And so, but I've also seen a lot of people, I feel like you can develop any skill with enough practice. And then it's just a matter of, do you want to use it? I could become a much better golfer. Now, could I be next Tiger Woods? No, those are those 1 in a trillion in a lifetimes that get to that level and that consistency. But could I get myself to be an excellent golfer? Yeah, I could. Am I? Absolutely not. I don't put in the hours. I don't put in the time. I don't do any of that. So, regarding you being an effective coach, it's just a matter of immersion. And then is it even what you want to do?
Hmm.
I mean,
Maybe you have another passion or calling.
Yoel, you wrote your book. Your books are pretty coachy.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's and Eric was saying also. I'm not saying it's not something I would pursue. It could be a matter of timing as well, or just more immersion. Like I've read Michael Singer probably 30 I don't know, 30 times or so, but not 200. Not that it's a comparison, but I do think sometimes it takes, different people need different seasoning and whatnot, but I can definitely, see from, hear and see from what you're saying that, you definitely are walking the walk, not just talking the talk. So, yeah.
Oh yeah. And every single part of what I coach, I live it down to my core.
Mm.
Like,
Mm.
1,000%. Like, anyone that knows me, what I eat, what I drink, how I sleep, all my rituals, all my things. And I actually, it seems when I say it out loud that I'm pretty like regimented, but I live a pretty fun life too. I do have a lot of fun, and it's but in order to have the freedom to have the fun, you also have to have order as the base in order to finance the fun. In the holistic world, there's a lot of very broke free people, but they're always broke and they're never really like, and again, I'm around them, so I hear them and I know them personally. So it's like, oh my God, my rent's going up. I got to move my kids. Well, that sucks, because now like what's affordable is in a school district that's less than appealing, especially in Florida.
Mm.
And now they've got to relocate because of not having a foundation. So I feel like that, again, I teach balance. Balance in anything is really where you can thrive.
Yeah, so I like to get into this holistic health coach because it's not a term I hear often. You hear of lots of different coaches, health coaches, life coaches, but this sounds like maybe it's a combination of both. So I'd like to really dive in and understand what that means and how you see it.
Yeah. So the health coach and life coach are a little bit synonymous because I happen to be in an industry that I know health and wellness. I work in that lane a lot, but I'm also an entrepreneur, and I have been since, even though I started this business at 18, I have started multiple companies in that time, including my various real estate endeavors. So I have a lot of various experience out there in the business world, and I'm a dad now, so I have parenting experience. I have a little bit of experience at my age in various things. And so when people are struggling in certain areas that aren't necessarily health related, like I work with a ton of people with injuries and cancers and autisms and all sorts of health issues. But then I have people that are just really stressed out, even though that's technically the biggest health issue. Working on stress, working on sleep. But I also coach them. Like, here's the craziest thing. So business and finance is a big part of my coaching, because like I have clients who have massively successful companies, but they don't know how to multiply their money. So they give it to a big investing firm who Tony Robbins wrote a magical book. I don't know if you guys have read it. It's called Money Master the Game.
No, but I have his latest book. I think he has another finance book. I forgot what it's called, but I haven't read that one. Yeah.
So this one was after the crash, and beautiful book, brought a ton of light. And then, here's a really fun statistic. 90% of all millionaires are made through a single asset class. Like, because the whole finance world is, you got to diversify, you got to diversify, you got to diversify. But if 90% of all millionaires are made in a single asset class, why would you diversify to the other 10% that is so scattered it's impossible to actually really understand and make money in, when there's one glaringly obvious asset class that makes 90% of all millionaires?
It's real estate.
So jackpot. And the amount of wealth that you can create and passive income you can create in real estate is unmatched by anything. And so in the last 7 years, what I've been able to do, coming from absolute dead DFL. You guys ever heard of that term, DFL?
No.
It's dead effing last.
Uh-huh.
Like if you're in a race of 100 people and you come in DFL, like you were last out of 100 people. DFL. It's a sports
That's
term.
hilarious.
Yeah. So, you know, and some of my mentors and coaches, what they were able to achieve in the last 5, 6, 7 years, unreal. It's unreal when you know what you're doing. And so I've become an investment advisor, a business advisor for a lot of my clients who have a net worth way more than mine, but my returns are 5 times of what they're doing.
That's fantastic.
And so the life coach, health coach have really, in reality, your life, this is one of my favorite, another favorite quote, a healthy man or a healthy person has 1,000,000 wishes and a sick person has 1.
Wow.
Okay. When you're sick or hurt, you want nothing else in life but to feel better.
Yeah.
That's your only wish. That's your only wish. And if you're well, you can wish for anything and everything, and you'll wish for lots of things. And so, you know, ultimately the life coach and the health coach, and they're inseparable, because when people are struggling with life, and it doesn't even need to be struggle, you know, at certain levels, it's thriving and thriving and thriving and thriving. So there's also that component to it. But human nature is that most people seek help when there's pain. And that's a hard lesson that I also had to learn, is that when things were going well, I became complacent because things are good. So who wants to be more uncomfortable when things are already really comfortable? So I've had a couple moments in my life and my career where things were just like perfect on paper. And then I'm like, I had to remind myself, go back in, keep learning, keep growing, keep expanding, because the more that I grow and expand from a conscious standpoint, the more that I can share and give away. Like so because of my passion for health and food, I donate for food, or, you know, communities or organizations that have to do with anything. It's really like wellness driven. So the more money I make, the more money I can give. And obviously children are a big place for me, and health is a big place for me. So, you know, providing money for people to buy land to grow gardens to feed their cause or whatever it happens to be. But I'm a huge believer in that. And my ability to give is only limited by my ability to have. But I can't give somebody $1 million if I don't have it to give.
Yeah, I recently heard something like, you know, it was some famous person talking about the money that they get, and they're like, yeah, I don't care how much money I get, because I'm just going to give it away so that I can get more. Because as long as I keep giving it away, I'm going to keep getting more to give it away.
Yeah.
So that's one of those things that, like, I'm trying to internalize, but it's one of those things that goes against what your natural thing is, but it makes total sense.
Yep. You have to look at flow. Money's supposed to flow, not compress. So when money flows, you're giving the energy that you are a money magnet. So you attract it to give it. You're attracted to give it. Yeah. But it rationally conflicts with what we think, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, what's the first thing you tell somebody who's, let's say, comes to you and says obviously every person is different in its circumstances, but in general, when somebody does have that sort of scarcity approach and actually is in the, you know, objectively seemingly in the dumps financially, how do you get that sort of abundance mentality to somebody? Like any practical things besides like the visualizing and meditating and that things, but what about practically speaking?
Yeah, practically speaking, it starts with disidentifying from money. Again, it's the stuff that I had to do. It's like I had to, if you can get to the root of that dysfunction, then you can help heal it. And so working on, if they're ready to work on non-attachment to money or disidentification from money, you can start there. You can also go, one of my favorite terms is to go general. So when I was having issues with money, I couldn't even fathom manifesting or positive thinking my way to more money. It was too, the pain point was too close. The scab was too raw. So I can't try to fix money with money. I had to go general and go to abundance, the feeling of abundance, because I can, even if I have $0 in my bank account, I can have abundance of air. I can have abundance of water. I can have abundance of sunshine here in Florida. I can have abundance of love for my friends and my family. I have abundance of water. There's water around. Like, I live right next to the ocean. Like, there is abundance everywhere. And so that I can get myself bought into and sold on. So I go general instead of specific. So I work on it on the internal level of detaching identification from it and possibly finding the root to dissolve that. And again, for me, there was a moment where I made the decision that there's never enough. So I saw that and I was able to heal that. And then disidentifying was another piece, and then going to the abundance. So that's like the inner work. And then the outer work is like feeling abundant in my life now, no matter how much money I have or don't have. And so that's sort of how you bridge the gap, because when you're like right in that nucleus of pain, it's really hard to say like, I am healthy and well when you're in the middle of stage 4 cancer, right? Like, that's a really hard sell. So what you've got to do is you've got to go general, because that person is breathing air and that person can drink water. So they can be like, they can go general to like, I have clean air to breathe. I have clean water to drink. And they can start going to things that are true for them in that moment, and then build momentum.
Wow.
Through repetition and immersion.
Amazing.
So I have a couple of things that I want to cover that I saw on your wall, and I guess kudos to your social media person. One of those is you have a thing on self-sabotaging. And I just want to get into that a little bit. You know, some people have, I guess, imposter syndrome, but there's other people that have self-sabotaging. So imposter syndrome, you're waiting for everything to just collapse because you don't believe it's real or you should be there or whatever it is. But I feel like self-sabotaging is that, but like with a hammer, so to speak. So if you can go into a little bit of, into self-sabotaging and what, as a coach, you would say to someone that you see it, but they don't.
Right. So when it comes to people in your life, I'll kind of answer two parts of this question. The first part is when you see it in somebody else, because when the ability to hear where someone is and what they're doing that you can help them with doesn't mean that you open your mouth to them about what's wrong with them or how you can help. So I am very, very selective. Number one, when I was younger, I would try to like help everyone because I could hear all their shit. But I realized that nobody wants my unsolicited advice.
Yeah.
And so what happened is that I every now and again, if it was something that was really acute, I might just make a soft mention and then see what their response is. If they're open, then I would go another layer and start to see if I can peel them back. But if my soft mention was met with a hard resistance, we're good. We're all good. I get to empathetically love them and not try to coach them out of their issues. When it comes to the self-sabotage and it's a client, it's literally just about recognition and to not hide from it. The more that you can declare it, because I have people journal their food, their sleep, their water, journaling is a very powerful practice, not just like journaling your positive mantras before you go to bed. I regularly journal my activity levels for a day to see where I'm, excuse the French, pissing away quality time. Where am I just messing around with, I do believe in, this is one of my phrases is I use social media now, but I will not be used by social media.
That's great.
And so that's how I feel about a lot of things in the technology world, is that use it to serve you, but when it's no longer serving you, you got to take an honest look at that. So I'm constantly looking at, so I journal, I do little audits of my life so that I can be truthful to myself about where I'm really self-sabotaging to any degree. It doesn't have to be a catastrophic self-sabotage, because life is all about degrees of variance. And so even the 3 minutes a day I might be scrolling through reels, that 3 minutes a day times 7 days a week times X 52 weeks a year, I could have looked at 25 commercial real estate deals in replace of those 3 minutes of scrolling. So looking at 25 real estate deals could land me potentially a multi-million-dollar contract, but I didn't do it because I was screwing around on my phone. So I will do these journals to just bring to light the areas that I'm sabotaging my own dreams and desires to a degree by choosing something that doesn't serve me. So I will have my clients you don't try to fix it, just become aware of it. And the moment you become aware of it and truthful of it, now it's not running you in the shadows. You have to consciously now choose to make that sabotaging decision. And that is a much more challenging, painful process to go through, because now, like, it's right in front of you. You're writing it down. Yeah. You're having to read it. Like, it becomes a very proactive process for people to write down their shit. And it starts there. We don't try to fix anything. Just be honest about it. Just be honest. Yep. So it comes out of the shadows and into the light.
Makes total sense. And then the other post that I saw was that the mind can heal the body. And we touched on it a little bit, but I feel like, through your accident and all your work, you might have some insights in how you used your mind to heal your body. Yeah,
there's you can go way down the rabbit hole with this. Like, again, have you guys heard of Joe Dispenza?
Yeah, I have. I'm trying to remember from where, but I've heard of it. I don't remember if I've read any of his stuff, but
okay, he's one of the big names in the world of personal development, self-help. So he was a chiropractor. He was a cyclist as well. And while he was riding his bike, he got hit by a car and fractured, 6 or 8 of his vertebrae. And while he was in the hospital, he started to put together his vertebrae mentally. Wow. So that's like way down the rabbit hole of healing, using the mind to heal the body.
It's not so crazy. We have one of our guests, actually, he told me that he had back pain and it was just killing him. And he just healed it with mindfulness. He just lay down and said, "Back, I know this is hurting me. I know you're trying to help me, but I don't need it anymore. And you can go." And he fixed his back pain just like that.
Yeah. Everyone on the planet has a different perspective of that type of healing. And some people are ready to listen to it. Some people have some other programming about it, like it's some Christian Science, never go see a doctor. Yeah. Right. So, so it's, everything is energy, which means the body is energy, which means thoughts are energy. So if you create a dominant energy of wellness in your body through persistent belief and thoughts, then yeah, it's all possible. For me, it was using my mind both to reduce stress and fear about my injury, and then using my mind to learn intellectually how to structurally rehabilitate my body and then progressively get it back to full function again.
How
So I
long did
used
that
it
take?
both physical and metaphysical. Oh gosh.
Hmm.
Years.
So
Yeah, because
you
there's
weren't
all
walking.
just different.
Sure,
Yeah.
but you weren't walking for years?
No, I wasn't. I had pretty debilitating pain for about 3 years that culminated with me not walking
Uh-huh.
because of blown discs in my low back.
Mm.
And then I got with a doctor who was doing some pioneering research at the time on structural rehabilitation. He taught me basically how that part worked. I integrated his knowledge with my background in holistic, wellness, fitness, rehab. And, again, a lot of hard lessons. Me trying stuff out through exercise, realizing, nope, that lever, that load, that pressure, that torsion, that can't do that. So knocked me back down 6 months, had to rebuild back up again.
Wow.
So, something that strikes me is that I think that a lot of times people will, watch or listen to a podcast like this and see you speaking, or they'll read things that an author like Eckhart Tolle writes. And definitely myself as well. One tends to forget how many years it went into to get to that point. So I even know for myself, Ben has actually told me many times, don't beat yourself up or don't compare yourself, because it's like, why isn't this happening yet? Why am I not? And it's like, it took this guy 15 years to get to this point, but I think people tend to forget that. Patience
Totally
is a big part of the perseverance, right? So
you ever heard the overnight success that only took 30 years?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's it. Nothing just it's the 10,000 hour rule, stuff like that. It just take lots. Yeah.
There's actually a clip floating around. I don't know if you saw it with I'm never going to get this name right. Giannis Antetokounmpo from the Bucks. Basically, reporter asked him, "Hey, how can you believe that you failed again?" And he basically says, "You asked me this last year. Just because we didn't win the championship, that doesn't make me a failure. Jordan was playing in the NBA for 15 years. He won how many 6 titles. So the last other 9 years, he was failing? No, he was working to progress to get to a goal. So it's not failing. Yep. You're just on the way to a goal." And I feel That's awesome. It's a message that kids are missing these days.
Yeah.
Because of all the instant gratification and everything is there. And, I want it now. Show me now. I need it now. Or they don't even get, a bad, my daughter, she didn't want to fill in her test and just hand it in with wrong answers. And I was like, that's the whole point of the test. We need to know what you know. Just give it in. She thought not giving in 100 would be a failure.
Yeah.
And no, it's to see what you know so you can learn for the next time. And I feel like it's a concept that's missed on this generation of these kids that they either get, good job or did okay, but there's no grades. So how do you know what you're striving for? But I sent it to all my kids, this quote, this interview. I was like, this is it, guys. You need this.
Great.
Every year you work towards something, towards a goal, right? Which is to get a promotion, to be able to take care of your family, to be able, provide the house for them or take care of your parents. You work towards a goal. It's not a failure. It's steps to success.
It's an amazing thing. Amazing. So if you haven't seen it, definitely look it up. But he just says point blank. He's like, I'm not failing. I'm working. We got to the finals. We didn't make it, but we didn't fail. We made it to the finals. What are you doing?
Michael Jordan played 15 years, won 6 championships. The other 9 years was a failure.
That's awesome.
So I want to talk about your kids a little bit. It is the Too Dad to Quit podcast. So you have your kids. How does that work? You're our first guest that's been separated. So,
Okay.
how does that work with you and your kids' schedules and things like that?
It works magically. So my ex and I are incredible co-parents, incredible friends, incredible business partners. And again, I am still the earner. So it's all organized so that I can still thrive in that sense. And I also bought a house outside of the neighborhood of our other house. So they literally can just, but the schedule is set up, the logistics are set up so perfectly and magically, so that I see them regularly. It's just it's a beautiful, harmonious, like it is the most, there's a new term called conscious uncoupling.
Yes, I've
Mhm.
heard that.
Sure.
And it's a beautiful thing where, my experience through divorce with my parents was nasty, bitter, hateful. They didn't talk for 20 years. It was always the kids being pulled in between and choosing sides and all of this just wretched stuff. And I swore that would never be the case ever. And, my ex also has done a good bit of personal development. And so it's nice. I see them all the time. We have a beautiful arrangement, a beautiful schedule. I live next door to them, basically, not right next door. It's not that
Yeah,
weird.
sure.
Just far enough, but just close enough.
It's
Hmm.
great.
Yeah, man, it's a wonderful, like, I really wish it for everybody. And it is possible through, well, you have to have two people that are willing to communicate and willing to work together. And if you can create that, everyone wins, especially the kids.
That's
Mm.
great. That's great.
Yeah.
And being that it is the Two Dad to Quit podcast, we like to leave our listeners and our audience with a Two Dad to Quit moment from our guests. So if you can share a Two Dad to Quit moment when you were like, man, I am the dad, or I'm killing it. These kids are awesome. I made those kids. Something that just your face lights up when you think about it.
Yeah, honestly, it's always being outside playing with the kids is the moment, because I have the disparity of age, I'm not, I always have to try to split myself in two for the younger one and the older one, and still, it's the age difference, and so, but when we can all engage and participate in whatever it is, again, it's usually something outdoors, but just being able to play together is like that for me is and I have them pretty regularly. We go to parks and we go to playgrounds and we, play ball at the fields, and we just do stuff as a threesome. And every one of those moments, like, I do actually stop to smell the roses, because I know that this time is finite with them at this age.
Mm.
And those are the moments where I'm like, it's everything to me.
Beautiful.
And when do you start teaching them golf?
At ages 2 and 3, I brought them with me.
Nice.
Wow.
Nice.
And that was an agreement, because with my ex being home all day with them, the only way that I got to go play golf was if I took them with me. I'm like, fine. So I started to take them with me, which is cool. So now they both can golf. Like, I mean, it's just amazing. Again, none of us are, we're not competitors, or we don't play that much, but to be able to, as a wrestler and a football player, golf was never on my radar. And it is the greatest sport for community, because you're outdoors. It's hours and hours. Anyone at any, like, 4 generations, great grandpa, grandpa, me, and kids can all play together.
Mm.
Yep.
What else can you do where people are 80 years apart in age, but you can all participate at the same thing at the same time? And it's just lovely. It's such a lovely thing.
It's so interesting, because one would think golf is the most solitary sport there is, because you're playing essentially on your own. But I know Ben's next question. I don't know if Ben's getting to the takeaway question, but I do have to ask you, because I am curious. You mentioned mentor a bunch of times. I just wanted to ask you, like, you made a conscious effort to get mentors, and you're always, like, you mentioned having mentors. You have different mentors. Like, how does that work? I'm just
basically, I'm always looking for people who are where I want to be in whatever area, and I will either hire them or just ask them.
Just like
And
that.
yeah. So if they're global figure, then I'll just consume all of their knowledge. And if they're a local person, then I'll just, hey, I'd like to take you to lunch, just pick your brain a little bit and build a friendship relationship with them in that capacity.
Amazing. It's great.
So I always look for that, person or people or group that literally are already doing what it is that I'm aspiring to do. Another Tony Robbins quote is success leaves clues. So if someone's already doing it, clearly they figured out how to do it. So just go ask them. They'll tell you. Like, it doesn't have to be, I've learned so many lessons so hard over such a long period of time that I like get over myself and just go to the source, condense decades into days and move on with it sooner than later.
It's great.
Yep. So that the last thing we like to leave our audience with is some tips or advice you have for anybody who's, about to separate or, thinking about separating from their spouse or their girlfriend.
Yeah. It always comes back to you. Work on yourself, work on getting to a state of inner peace. So here's I have this right on my refrigerator. It says peace. It does not mean to be in a place where there is no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be in the midst of those things and be calm in your heart.
That's great.
Beautiful.
Like when you have ground zero in here, you have everything you need. But if you don't have ground zero here, you're going to be reactive. And that sucks for everyone, including yourself. So the more grounded that you can be, the more powerful you will be in every single decision you make.
Amazing.
Amazing. Great advice.
Thanks.
So thank you, Eric, for your time.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
It was
It's
great.
been a pleasure.
Love what you're doing, what you guys are up to. So thank you so much. And
Likewise.
thanks for reaching out and all the things.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Cool. I appreciate it.
Before we let you go,
Okay.
I just want to let our audience know, this is toodadtoquit.com, toodadtoquit on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Please reach out to us, YouTube. We now have a clips channel. We're about to launch a cooking show. So we've got a lot of things coming up. So don't forget to subscribe. You don't want to miss a thing. We will see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Too Dad to Quit podcast. Available at toodadtoquit.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.